I don't know about you, but I am recovering from people-pleasing syndrome. I used to be like Dolores Roach, hooked up on past trauma-bonded relationships. And yes, like Lewis, I am guilty of people-pleasing family members who have passed on. I can't say that I'm ride or die like Dolores. I would never have taken the heat for Dominic and served a 16-year prison sentence. I most definitely would have ratted his ass out. But I have been left holding the bag a few times after being a people-pleaser. So in this video, we're going to talk about people-pleasing, why we do it, and why it brings out the worst in everyone around us. So please stay tuned. I love a great serial killer movie, and I have to say that Amazon Prime is on a roll. First there was Swarm, a great miniseries with a black female lead. Now there is The Horror of Dolores Roach, a podcast turned miniseries that is airing on Amazon Prime as we speak. I have to say that I watched the series a few times simply because I miss living in New York City, particularly Washington Heights. It's a haven for Dominicans and Puerto Ricans and Haitians. And like Dolores, I remember the old Washington Heights. It was brimming with color and laughter and vibrancy. It was ethnic. It was rough around the edges, but it gave its residents a sense of welcoming and belonging. Now, let's fast forward to 2023 and gentrification has taken over. Now it's littered with big food chains, luxury apartment buildings, and people who don't want to assimilate into the culture.
Lord offered me 2 free months rent. He was pretty desperate to get me into this godforsaken place. Feel free to put me out of my misery.
Tempting.
I get it. Life is about change, but when change puts a certain sector of people in a considerable disadvantage, we need to ask ourselves why.
And you know what? For 35 years, this area has been nothing but cheap and dangerous and dirty. My predecessor may have liked it that way, but I have a mandate to bring in some people with a higher standard of living.
Anyway, that's a topic for another video entirely. Let's talk about Dolores. Dolores is a likable character. She has no intentions of becoming a drug dealer or a mass murderer for that matter. It's just that sometimes we take a wrong turn and we don't have enough love or support to get back on the right track. Dolores was trying to be straight and narrow. That's why she attended 3 semesters at a community college. But the allure of fast money and romance lured her into the streets where she became the queen of the heights.
It was the king of this block.
All right, you got some customers?
Yeah. And for those 5 years, I was his queen.
But she had a contingency plan. She needed to make as much money as possible and get out. And her plans were to buy a house across the pond in Hoboken.
There's your house in Hoboken, baby.
Only problem was the police had other plans for her. And that included locking her up in a prison cell with her long-term girlfriend, Tabitha.
So you trained in prison with a handless masseuse?
Yeah, I sure did.
In jail, Dolores learns lessons from Tabitha, a handless masseuse. Over time, she's able to tame the ugliest, meanest prisoners. She earns the name Magic Hands by simply giving massages in the cafeteria.
They call me Magic Hands.
Magic Hands Dolores.
Dolores is clearly gifted and intends to turn her life around when she is released from prison. The only problem is that she has nowhere else to go. Dominic ran off with all of her money and all of her friends and family are now gone. She only has Luis, a childhood friend who offers her a room in his basement apartment. The only issue is that the empanada shop that Luis is running is failing. The rent is overdue and the place is literally falling apart. Worse, both Dolores and Luis develop a toxic relationship that is based on people-pleasing. Luis wants to please Dolores, and Dolores in her own way wants to please Luis. After all, she did learn a few tricks in prison.
Look at what you're doing for us. Giving up this place, your shop. You know, I know how much you love this place.
Prison. The first victim is the landlord, or slumlord, Gideon Perlman. He is an honest, hard-working man who has gambling debt and an affinity for good. You know I gotta keep it PG rated for the algorithm. He believes that if people can't afford the rent, well, that's their problem. They simply need to figure it out or get out. This triggers Dolores because she realizes that she has been on the short end of the stick virtually her entire life. She is the one who is always used, abused, and exploited. She is a typical people pleaser. She is self-sacrificing and gives so much of herself and receives very little in return.
He knew your gullible lovesick ass would do the time for him, which you did, and he let you.
Dolores sees red and thus decides that she's going to go for it. A few hours later, Mr. Perlman is being drained, chopped, and kneaded, and he's being served up at Luis's local empanada shop. Luis believes that Dolores' plan was brilliant because he can get rid of evidence and also save his failing business, all at the same time.
Yo, we ain't done business like that since, man, not since my pops was still alive. Whew.
But the worst thing about being a people pleaser is that you receive this insane dopamine hit. It's a high that really can't be explained. And much like any addiction, it turns into a vicious cycle of pain and pleasure, pain and pleasure, pain and pleasure. After all, people pleasers please because it gives them a sense of pleasure, all the while destroying them from the inside out. Dolores came out clean. Yet she continued to engage in one heinous crime after another. She killed the local neighborhood drug dealer and her minion, not to mention a private investigator who she hired to find Dominic.
I never don't find him.
You found Dominic?
Then Gideon's son, Jonah, and lastly, Joy, a woman who happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. Dolores wants to run, but she can't escape the monster she created, the monster within herself, and the monster that Luis has become. Before Dolores, Luis was just a simple man with maybe a few screws loose.
Shop, but Luis is a misunderstood culinary visionary.
A misunderstood culinary visionary?
Over time, Luis became an accomplice to murder. He set Nellie up and basically poisoned everyone in their neighborhood. Luis felt powerless as he struggled to save a dying legacy, only for it to be revived with Dolores' new profession. And Luis, like Dolores, was a people pleaser. He felt like he could save Dolores by cleaning up her mess. Yet all he managed to do was make things a heck of a lot worse.
We're gonna now search every inch of this building. You have once again made it worse.
The reasons why people pleasing is so destructive is simply because there is no growth for you or the people you are trying to please. In many cases, you are hindering them by becoming an enabler. Worse, your needs go unmet, and after a bout of people pleasing, you become bitter, surly, and resentful. Your life falls apart simply because you're not tending to your basic needs, and the cycles of pain and pleasure that kept you hooked on people pleasing become more about pain than pleasure, thus turning you into a monster. What's the real remedy to this? Well, you have to learn how to create your own internal worlds. Worlds that you can escape to, worlds where you can find refuge and comfort. This is especially true for people who may not have a great support system or loved ones that can give them guidance and support. You have to learn to find inner guidance and find that self-love. Peace out.